and welcome to the Abundology Podcast. I'm here with Justine Bloome today, who does a variety of things. I know you're a meditation teacher, a business advisor, a business mentor, and you're one of the people that I've met that has a same business philosophy as me, is business as a spiritual practice.
Yes,
so
I'm really looking forward to talking with you about this.
Yeah, so that's why I'm so excited to have you here today, because this is how I ran my business for 20 years, my company. And we've talked a little bit before we started this, and what you've said to me, how you've done business too.
Yes, so not for as long as you. I feel like you've
I'm
probably got
old.
one up on me on that.
A decade or two.
But yeah, it was definitely something that I've been spiritual for my whole life, but I didn't bring it into my work until probably about 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, okay, great.
And yeah, it's really built, and now it's become, an everyday thing for me. It's how I operate. So I think we need more of it, particularly now in the workplace of hustle and more and demands, and burnout is now a World Health Organization legitimate thing.
Yeah, legitimate thing, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a syndrome anymore. And so I think it's crucial that we're having these kinds of conversations.
Yes, I do too. And it goes back to, and I hate to say work-life balance because it's all life, you know. And we forget that sometimes with our old-fashioned thinking of, we're a different person at home than we are at work, but we're the same person.
Yes.
And that spirituality and mindfulness, if we're doing it at home, of course it translates over to the workplace.
Yes.
And it makes you a much better entrepreneur, boss, employee,
yes,
co-worker.
Yes. And this was one of the big realizations that I had, is that the workplace is, as we all know and love it, it's kind of designed for masculine energy.
Yep.
And so it's designed around a 24-hour period, and it's not necessarily designed for the way that feminine energy flows. And so as a result, I do think that's why we kind of left our spirituality at the door when we entered the workplace as women, because we were in this environment that was in that very different energy cycle than what we kind of naturally live in. And so I'm seeing the balancing out of those two energies more and more in the workplace now, and the celebration of the feminine energy in the workplace. And I think that's what's giving this a platform for these kinds of conversations to be more public.
Yeah, I think so too. It's interesting that you say that, because I'm in my 50s now, and when I first started in the work world, I had young children, and I was in a male-dominated industry, in the mortgage industry, and you did not even bring up that you had children. You didn't have a picture of your kids on your desk or anything. You didn't mention them. That could not be an excuse. It was just, that was the way the culture was now.
Yes.
Or then, I should say, not now, thank goodness.
Yeah, but I actually think it's early leading indicators, but I've spoken to a lot of younger men who are new fathers, and they are in a similar predicament now, but it's slightly different, where they want to spend more time at home because they are more involved as a parent, this next generation of fathers.
Yeah.
And what they're facing is the same kind of guilt that we probably felt when we first had our kids, where we're not spending enough time at home, but we also feel like we're letting our team down if we don't spend that time at work. And there's that, it is a balancing act.
Yes.
It's interesting to hear that. I'm starting to hear that from some young fathers now.
Yeah, I'm sorry for them for feeling that, but maybe that'll bring more awareness to how women have been feeling for decades.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah. So we had chatted a little bit before you got here about marketing and meditation meant to be together.
Yes, I believe so. So my meditation practice it's been a journey, but it didn't really get serious until I was in New York. When I say serious, I mean like I made it a practice,
right?
Because it is designed to be a practice. It's not designed to be like a glass of wine or a Band-Aid, which is probably how I was using it before.
Yeah.
But when I moved from Australia to New York, the change in pace was incredible, and I felt it in my central nervous system.
Yes.
And even keeping pace in the office, not just in the city, it was just relentless. And I kind of identify as an introvert end of the scale. Like, I get my energy from being alone, and it's hard to find alone time in New York.
Yeah, it is. It's so true.
So that's where I really committed and started to make sure it was like brushing my teeth every day.
Mm-hmm.
And initially, yeah, it starts out as like a coping mechanism for stress, but then ultimately it starts to unlock this kind of inner wisdom.
Yes.
That I think I had probably ignored because I've spent 20 years being a strategist, which is ultimately a very cerebral
In your brain.
thing.
Yeah.
You're just like in your head all the time and analyzing everything. And I've had tons of therapy in my life as well, and my therapist would always say that like this was completely disconnected from this, and so head needed to kind of marry with heart. And I ultimately started to realize that my heart had a lot more wisdom than the ego mind.
Yes.
And then I really got tuition and proper meditation instruction. Ultimately then went through my teacher training, which was in of itself transformative. And that's when I really started to realize, wow, we actually have all of the answers within us, particularly when you are a solopreneur or an entrepreneur or someone who is building a personal brand of some description. There's so much of our energy that's looked in on the external and in comparison and what other people are doing, but ultimately the truer you are to you, to your message and your inner wisdom, the right people kind of hear you differently. You attract the audience that you were meant to have.
And it's a great way to weed out people that are not on the same vibe as you.
Yes.
All you need to do is be authentic and be you.
Yes.
But as we know, in order to do that, you have to get in touch with who you are.
Yeah, well, the word authenticity, I think, has been so overused by the marketing practice.
Agreed. Agreed.
And ultimately, I think authenticity can get confusing because some people think of it as, well, I remain in my identity, and identity can be a very cerebral thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a very egoic thing
as
good
well. Point. Yep.
And so if that's what authenticity is to you, well, are you really being authentic? Because I think authenticity comes from the body and the soul and the heart, which is very woo-woo, but at the same time, you can use that in a very pragmatic, business-like way.
Absolutely.
That serves you.
Yeah. I know sometimes when because we all, try to come up with our marketing ideas and all that. And I have to say, the thing that I return to over and over is meditation. Mm-hmm. I go to the meditation and I just let the thing come.
Yes.
So it's not coming from my brain. It's coming from my heart, my soul, my authentic, using that again, self.
Yes, but that is your authentic self, because when you meditate, you go beyond the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And you've gone into a different inner wisdom that it can't be tapped when we are just living in our conscious brain. It's very subconscious.
Yes. Good point.
Yeah. So I love it, and it's very I think fulfilling is probably a good word, but also I just get so much more joy in helping people who come to me because they think they want my help with marketing. And then I'll say, okay, great. Well, first I'm going to get you to do these meditations, and we're going to unpack like what comes from them. And, sometimes that's met with a little resistance, which is normal. But then ultimately, once they surrender to that, this is the process that I take them through, the learnings and the joy that kind of come out of these people, and they feel like this is the message they were kind of born to deliver,
right,
rather than it's something they've constructed from pieces they've found on the internet from people like them.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I had clients about a month ago, a business partnership, and they came and they were wanting, to get ready for build their business. And, I said, you guys really aren't there yet. You need to start with the energy work, and knowing in a way, I felt like they were being let down for what their expectations were.
Yes.
But that's that's what
But
my
they were
job
attracted
is.
to you.
Exactly.
They came
And
to you for a
exactly.
reason.
So that's what we did. And then they're actually coming back this week to follow up because they did the energy work and they realized, yes, we weren't ready yet to
Yes.
start off on the next part of the marketing.
Oh, I love those stories.
I know, I love those stories
That's
too.
why we do what we do, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting as we go into this journey. I come back to the feminine and the masculine energy piece a lot because that, and also just the cycles of nature. Because I think for the majority of my career to date, and I say to date because it's really only this past year, that I've really shifted my perspective on this. I have been, it was very striving. Like, I have my goal. As soon as I have my goal, I do everything to achieve it. And the energy I drew from, sometimes I look back on it and I'm like, where did that energy come from? Because, maybe it's in my natal chart or something. But ultimately, I'm now at a period in my life where I'm like, I'm just tired. And when I look at why, I've realized, wow, there is, for the feminine energy, there's a 28-day cycle where the types of work we should be doing in that 28-day cycle are very different. And when I try and force a more yang energy in a more yin period, it doesn't work. It just exhausts me. Whereas when I do it in a yang period, then I feel energized by it. And that's what I think, that's how I'm sort of looking at the spirituality of business as saying, well, maybe that 24-hour cycle, which was constructed in the masculine, isn't the best way of being creative, of being intuitively creative, of getting projects done in a way that the time just seems to not matter. It just seems to flow.
Right. You're working more in the flow.
Yes.
Before we move on to that point, though, I want to talk a little bit about the 28-day cycle.
Yeah.
Which, of course, corresponds with our female cycle.
And the moon.
In the moon. I know. This is amazing how everything's so connected.
Well, we are nature. I think we sometimes forget that.
Yes. So which part of the cycle, then, would be the yin and the yang?
Yes. So the new moon
Okay.
is a yin energy.
Okay.
So it is a go inward, reflect, research, set some new intentions. It's like a reset kind of energy. And so that tends to be a little bit more inward. And then, so we just had a new moon recently.
We did.
And so yesterday was the quarter moon. So we move into a yang energy just for a couple of days.
Okay.
Yeah. And then this is a good time to sort of start initiating new projects, collaborating like this, communicating what some of your intentions are, starting to make some plans and brainstorming. It's really good creative energy, I find. And then you go into a little bit of a yin, but it's not like a complete dip right before the full moon. And then the full moon, of course, is yang energy.
Yes.
And yang energy is, and there's the yang energy of the full moon is the same as our ovulation period from the feminine. So the new moon is the bleed.
Got it.
Yeah. So the yang energy of the full moon, that is like summertime. Like, it's like being outside, expressing yourself, being public with expressing what it is you're doing, good time for PR, launching new things, that type of energy. And I've learned all of this from Kate Northrup.
Oh, yes.
You know Kate?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And then there is a much longer period of more yin style energy as we come back into it does ebb and flow for the next period, but it is a period more of details and tying up loose ends before you go back into the cycle again. So the back half of that month tends to be where you really kind of want to knuckle down, and that's when the work just seems to flow. That really, like spreadsheets.
Yeah, the detailed stuff that the other times you just dread doing. Yes.
Yes. And so that learning, I first started doing the lunar work about a year ago, and I learned from people like Spirit Daughter, Jill Winterstein. I don't know if you know her.
Yes.
and also an Australian woman by the name of Ezzy Spencer.
Oh, I'm not familiar with her.
Yeah, so she has this great chart of all the different energy cycles of the moon. I started that about a year ago, and then more recently layered in Kate Northrup and her sort of cycles of the seasons. That has been really interesting to think about all those different layers of, oh, these all correspond with one another.
They do.
And it makes sense when I've got them all on my calendar now and I track them. And when I'm feeling a certain way in my body after my morning meditation and the plan that I had for that day doesn't feel like
it
that's what I
fits.
should be doing,
Yeah.
I'll invariably look at my calendar. I'm like, oh,
Of course.
of course, that's because the moon was doing this or my cycle is doing that.
Yeah. So it's fascinating because then we have the seasons, the energy of the seasons
Correct.
too. So we have, the winter, that pulling in energy with then once again the summer.
Yes.
So fascinating. So we have all of those seasons if we're doing business planning to
Yes.
look at, and then we have the
Correct.
moon cycles within those seasons.
Within the month.
Within the month.
And so the masculine energy, it is aligned to this, but it's just on a 24-hour period. So the masculine energy goes through that sleep time, nighttime, morning, kind of plant the seed, what's my intention for the day, daytime, like do all of the things, and then wind down and tie up loose ends before you go to sleep again.
Yeah.
That all happens in a 24-hour period. So it's still the same, it's just in one day
Yeah.
versus
28.
28. So I
That's
find
great.
it really, that kind of unlocked so much for me in terms of like business as a spiritual practice.
Yes.
Because I rearranged my days and my weeks and my months and my year around that feeling and that energy of how am I going to harness this to my benefit.
To my benefit, yeah. That has been one of the things I've been unlearning since I'm not on the 9 to 5, treadmill anymore.
Yes.
Is we're so conditioned to look at the clock and work off the clock.
Yes.
Well, that's not how my natural cycle is.
No.
I do best. I do the best reneeing when I'm able to have a relaxing morning, do some yoga, and then start working for me around 11 o'clock.
Yes.
That's when I'm balanced
Great.
and everything is good. But I think that fortunately a lot of people now do have flex time, so they're able to set more of their schedules. But I think for people that are still working that 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 even, it's hard to fit your cycle into that box.
It is. I did try to hack it though.
Did you in New
Yes.
York?
So I only left my role in New York in March, but I probably had a lot of these realizations and started to track at least the lunar cycle in around September of last year. So I had some time in a very high pressure environment. It was, it was almost like New York on steroids, this agency that I worked at. And what I found is, like you, like those mornings were precious for me because I know I do my best thinking in the mornings. So anything that really required me to single task, the worst possible thing for me to do in the morning is to start with email.
Me too.
So I would block out every morning, and my admin would be very, very protective of that time for me, so that meetings were in the afternoon, and in the morning I had time where I could really single task and say, right, this project that needs to be done, that's taking up this time. And I had the benefit of being able to lock myself away, and I also had a lot of flexibility whether I could work from home, which was great. So I think you can feel empowered to ask for those things. That's one of the things I think I've learned in my career is I'm Australian, I'm very brash, and I say what I mean. And so that has served me really well because I have often asked for what I needed, but couched it in such a way as I work better when.
Right.
Can I please?
I'm more productive when.
Yes.
Yes.
And then I show them the proof in the pudding. So once my boss or my workmates start seeing that, they're like, oh, that's the way she works. And as a team leader, because I was running a team of 40 people, I instilled that in the team. So I had them all do certain kinds of personality quizzes and really understand how they work best in a team environment. So they had the tools to communicate that to other people.
Just the simple fact of,
Yeah.
of knowing yourself.
Yes.
No, just taking the personality test so you know, because we're conditioned to just go do.
Correct.
And if we just took the time to be like, oh, I'd be so much more productive. I get so much more done. And then in my case, our case now, have more free time
Yes.
if you're more productive. If I just did this.
Yes.
It seems so simple, doesn't it?
It seems so simple, but I think really what it comes down to is how good are you at communicating boundaries?
Yep.
Because if you can understand your own boundaries and communicate them, then it creates space, not just physical space, but like mental and emotional space.
Yes.
And that, I think, is the key to kind of unlocking spiritual business kind of practices.
I agree, because that meditation grounds you, and you know so much more, not just about yourself, but really connection to you know so much more about everything.
Yes.
And having that knowledge puts you at a different level. I'm going to say better or worse, but you're at a different level.
Yeah.
So you know where your boundaries are, and because you are calm and you know where they are, it's much easier to state that.
Yes.
Like, this works for me and this doesn't work for me.
Yes.
But from a calm place, a grounded place.
But let's also be real, like that doesn't come immediately. So for anyone that's listening or watching that doesn't have a meditation practice yet, for me, what that looked like is the first few years I had to kind of deprogram
Yes.
myself. And a lot of things came up where I realized that some of the validation that I was seeking externally was why I was making certain decisions. And, that's something that you've got to be ready to face and be ready to say, oh, okay, that's how that's been. This is not it served me to a point, and I'm always very grateful. Like, it served me to a point.
Yeah,
Say,
it got us here.
thank you.
Exactly.
But now I'm going to choose something different.
Yes.
And the consciousness or the awareness of that is the starting point. And so it can be a little scary, I think, for some people to say, but this is what has made me so successful to date. To pivot that feels scary.
It does feel scary, and you have results from what's been so successful
Correct.
to date. And when you're first starting, you're not really sure. Like, you believe in your soul that this is how it works, but the evidence that's been reflected to you so far with what you've been doing hasn't worked like that.
Yes.
So you're in this, this pull. Like, I feel like this is the right way to do it, but I'm not sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where I had one of my biggest learnings this year. And this is where I think it's kicked up into another level. So, work visa is a thing for me, obviously. And so shifting from where I was in New York to where I am now, I had to go through a new process and a new application. And it took a little while. It took 4 months. And for 4 months, I couldn't work.
Oh.
And so that is a whole exercise in surrender.
Yes.
That I had never had to experience before. I've always been one of those people that like sets their target and like strives and reaches and hits it. It was like up to the gods or up to the the powers that be, whether or not this was going to come through, and I had no control over it. Once that application is in, it was like control is completely out of my hands.
Yep.
It was out of my attorney's hands. No amount of phone calls to him were going to change anything. So I really just had to practice with part of my meditation practice became this notion of surrender. And wow, like what came up during that period around all the things I was attached to as my way of operating in the world was quite interesting. And now that awareness means that when I'm feeling that pinch in my stomach around, oh, but I need to be doing this.
Yeah.
I'm like, but really why?
Yeah.
Like, why do I need to be doing that? Do I really? Or is that just my ego mind telling me that I need to be doing that?
Exactly. It's such good realization and learning too.
Yeah.
And also that when you are in charge, that giving up, the surrendering to because we feel sometimes like we're the ones that need to make this happen.
Yes.
All these, we need to drive these people and reach this goal and do this thing. And it just doesn't quite work like that.
I have been, well, that's the period of surrender was incredible to me because opportunities came out of nowhere, seemingly out of nowhere. However, I think before they were probably there, but I was so blinkered about my one goal that I wasn't even noticing them.
Yeah, you had blinders on.
Yeah. And so it was curious to me. I was like, wow, the more I surrender, the more things come to me. And this is easy. And
yes,
I couldn't necessarily work on these things, but I was like, in a minute, I'll have my visa and I'll be able to work with you. And they all waited. And it was, so I came out of the gates flying, whereas I wasn't sure if I was going to have enough business, if I was going to have enough clients, where my revenue was going to come from. And I heard this wonderful thing during that period, which was this notion of the universe is my employer.
Yeah.
And I've got it on a little sticky note in my office now, because just this notion of, oh yeah, I do have an employer. It's just not a human being.
Yeah.
That's paying me a salary. But it doesn't mean that the universe doesn't still have my back and isn't going to put all of those opportunities in my path. I just need to be aware of them.
Exactly. My saying is the universe is my bank account.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, because, it's unlimited funds.
Yes.
And the same way, you don't really know where they're going to come from, but they always come.
Yes.
Once again, going back to that surrender and faith and trust that everything works out, those fundamental beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really liberating.
It is really liberating.
Especially as a freelancer or a self-employed person, to kind of go in with that feeling. It has changed the way I negotiate, the way I price myself.
Because there's no self-doubt anymore.
And no scarcity.
No scarcity. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. This is what I'm worth.
Yes.
And if it doesn't work for you, I completely understand where that,
fine. Someone else will
step up and exactly.
Yes, another opportunity will come.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the lack of attachment to those things means that it just ebbs and flows, just like the energy.
It does ebb and flow. Yeah. I am getting a little into the astrological chart thing. My Jupiter sits at the way top of my chart, so it's kind of like my money maker sitting at the top of my whole entire life. Amazing. So I know it's just a nice little gift. Thank you.
Thank you.
But with that, though, I realize that my money is not a consistent thing. My income, it really ebbs and flows depending on what my other planets are doing. So it's freeing, though, to be like, there's nothing's wrong with me. I'm not doing business the wrong way, or I should do it another way. Yes. It just happens to be that cycle right now where I don't have as much income coming in. Yeah. But you know what? Next month, that cycle, moves into a different area.
Yeah, and it makes you appreciate that when those cycles do come back in, make hay while the sun shines.
And enjoy your downtime while it's there. Yeah, so there's, the benefit of both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's the natal chart stuff has been really interesting, especially getting a full natal chart reading. I realized when I got mine done that, oh, wait, I've been built to be a workaholic. Everything. And that shift that I've had in the last few years is because, I turned 40 a couple of years ago, and that's a bit of a turning point where you go through that step more into your North Node. And it was extraordinary to me the way that this person, she's here in Portland, read my chart, and I was like, it's like you're reading the book of my life. It's kind of crazy.
It is kind of crazy.
I'd never met this person before I moved here, so she knew nothing about my life. And it's extraordinary that it's just all in these planets and how they're moving. But it makes sense because energetically we're all pulled and pushed by them.
Well, just look at the moon. Yeah. Look at how the moon affects us, and then think of all the other planets, Yeah. I had the luxury of my assistant for about 2 years was an astrologer. Oh. So every single day she would tell me what was going on in my chart.
Oh, my gosh.
She still does, but she doesn't work for me anymore. I know. Talk about a gift. That was something that really woke me up to astrology and how because there was a couple times where I would be on vacation, and one in particular, and I had this massage, and something like happened, like something broke loose, and I'm not really a crier, but after this massage I could not stop crying.
Yeah.
So I call her up and I said, what's going on into my chart? She's like, well, at exactly the exact time I was having the massage, this planet hit this planet, and I don't remember what it was now, but and she goes, you're probably crying a lot. It's like, yes, I'm crying a lot.
Wow.
It's fascinating to me.
Yes.
Down to the minute
That's
of when things happen.
crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy cool.
But it's crazy cool, but it's also kind of crazy that most of society puts that over in this woo-woo box.
Yeah.
And even to even the stuff we were talking about with the moon, like when I tell people that I track the lunar cycle, they're like, what? And I'm like, just try it. It will unlock so much creativity in you. And it's knowledge, right?
Yes.
It's information. It's not like future prediction or anything, but it's just another data point to tell you, oh, okay, you're probably going to be feeling like this. I'll check in with myself, take a deep breath. I'm like, yep, that's how I'm feeling.
Yes, exactly.
Or vice versa. I'll feel something. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
And I don't have like a logical reason.
And, if you weren't in touch with this, you may go to the self-criticism, self-blame. I shoulda, woulda, coulda. If I was more this, I wouldn't be feeling this. When it's just a planet.
Yes.
That makes me feel so much better. Oh, it's just that planet out there. I'm fine.
Yes. Yeah. It makes you feel less crazy.
Yeah, less crazy. I love that. Well, you have brought me, I'm so excited about this, the Mindful Strategist Journal.
Yes.
There's so many great questions and weekly observations.
Yeah.
In here, poetic pause. Oh, I just even love the sound of that. So you do sell this on your website, and I'll put the link in the little write-up that we do.
Yes.
This has been such a joy. I would love to have you come back and talk to me another time.
I loved this. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. All right, we'll talk to you later.